Well, even before Trump gets sworn in, there are various protests all across the country. Now, mainstream media may try to put the face of the protest as being primarily minorities, African Americans. But truth be told, there are a tremendous number of white people who are protesting as well. Why? Because they have finally woken up to the realization that the ACA is something that they use, something that they need, and that Mr. Trump basically has promised to get rid of it. And people are upset because they know damn well that repealing it is easy. They got the votes to do that. Replacing it is another matter. And now these Republican politicians are starting to run scared.
Protests in Washington this weekend, the big civil rights protest that took place in very cold rain on Saturday. There was also an immigrant rights protest of some considerable size this weekend in Washington, D.C. On Sunday, in more than 36 cities around the country, there were some surprisingly large rallies against Donald Trump, and specifically in defense of the Affordable Care Act. This was seen yesterday in Boston. You see everybody looks a little cold here, including Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, and you see speaking at the podium. They had planned to hold this Boston rally inside Faneuil Hall, which is the backdrop for these shots. So many people turned up, they had to move what was supposed to be an indoor event outside into the cold.
Those are white people that are standing out there, folks. Those aren't a whole bunch of black people at an event in Boston. I'm here to tell you.
So they're standing outside Faneuil Hall. They had to because about 6,000 people turned out for that event yesterday in Boston. In Michigan, in Macomb County, that was the one where Senators Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer and other Democratic leaders all made appearances. Washington Post reports that it was 10,000 people who turned out, again, in January, and a very cold day, for an outdoor rally in Michigan. We saw Senator Debbie Stabenow there.
Again, those are not black people, those are white people.
Another 2,000 people turned out at San Francisco City Hall yesterday. In Los Angeles, outside the USC Medical Center, they got very big crowds yesterday. In Portland, Oregon, they turned out this very large, look at that, size of people, the size of that crowd turning out in Portland, Oregon yesterday. There were also, incidentally, a lot of people who came out in Portland, Maine yesterday. There were more than 1,000 people who turned out in Richmond, Virginia yesterday. And you know, one thing to know about these events, these ones I just listed, all of these had high-profile Democratic elected officials at them. So in Boston, you saw there, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Ed Markey was there as well. Boston Mayor Tom Menino Boston Mayor was there. In Richmond, it was Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who of course ran for vice president with Hillary Clinton. In San Francisco, it was Nancy Pelosi. In LA, it was Senator Kamala Harris. As I said, in Michigan, it was Senators Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer and lots of other Democratic elected officials. Two Democratic senators from Michigan there, Peters and Stabenow. Elected officials turned out at these things, right? With the idea being, and this is part of the Bernie Sanders organizing effort within the Democratic Party now, the idea being that the Democratic Party, elected officials from the Democratic Party, and this sort of grassroots, people-powered stuff against Trump, the effort among the Democratic Party now is to make those two things one and the same, to make the organized Democratic Party and what looks like it's going to be a considerable anti-Trump movement, they're trying to make those one thing, or to at least have them pulling in the same direction. We also saw some big events this weekend, specifically around trying to save the Affordable Care Act. Less like rallies and more like organizing meetings.
Now, I'm going to draw to your attention the fact that it's not just people that were quote-unquote Democrats. You're going to see people that are in Republican voting districts do the same thing. They voted for Trump, but now they realize that their asses are in trouble because if the Affordable Care Act goes, they're not going to have health care. Here we go.
Standing room only in Kentucky this weekend at this event trying to save the Affordable Care Act. Also Raleigh, North Carolina, they got a huge turnout there for an event to try to save the Affordable Care Act. Same thing in Iowa, you know. It's one thing to organize a Save have a bunch of people turn up for that. It's another thing. It's another thing to have a ton of people turn up when you're a member of Congress who supports Trump, right? You're a member of Congress who wants the opposite of all those folks. If you're a member of Congress who wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, who's going to vote to get rid of it, if you're a member of Congress who supports Trump, then those kinds of elected officials all over the country, they are also now starting to see their public events be very well attended. They're starting to see their constituent events get overrun with people who want to give them a piece of their mind.
We're at this Congressman Wenstrom's coffee house, and I asked one of the people working for the congressman, this guy in the plaid shirt, if the congressman was going to talk to everybody here. And he said he's going to try. And I said, could he take questions from the whole group? And he goes, ma'am, that's not what this is designed for. He'll try. And I felt summarily dismissed. I think that he should be standing up here, taking questions from every single person here, so we can all hear his responses. This is a cop-out and a chicken crap way to go. Trying to take away the Affordable Care Act. They want to defund Planned Parenthood, the only place where women can get affordable care. It just feels like nobody cares about it. I feel unrepresented and uncared about, and I'm sick of it. Does he have a heart? Do I even have a heart? I can't talk about it, I get too upset.
That was in Southern Ohio this weekend. The Republican congressman there is Brad Wenstrup. I'm not sure he knew what he was in for when he sent out this, "You're invited. Coffee with your congressman." He sent this notice last week, but this is what happened when he turned up. A huge room, very full of people, lots of people very frustrated with him that he hadn't made enough time to take their questions. And when he did take their questions, particularly on why he was voting to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, he found that those conversations were very prickly.
Can't we fix the broken parts instead of throwing out everything and starting over? No one said that.
It's going to cost you more.
Why did you vote 60 times to repeal?
So I wasn't in for 60 minutes.
Okay, how many times did you vote to repeal?
A few.
That's what it was like for one Ohio Republican congressman this weekend facing his own constituents. In Colorado, another Republican congressman, Mike Kaufman, actually turned and ran when he faced something like this. He snuck out the back of his own event when he, too, faced an overwhelming number of his own constituents who were really, really not happy with him about him voting to get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
Coloradans are divided, and today more than 150 people showed up to a community meeting, with many wanting to ask Congressman Mike Kaufman about it. As 9 News reporter Nelson Garcia shows us, more people showed up than they planned for, leaving dozens waiting for hours with no results.
All they wanted to do,
And there were hundreds of people here.
was go into the community room at the Aurora Public Library to meet with Congressman Mike Kaufman.
Representative didn't have a plan. They expected just a small handful of people to show up.
Instead, they came in droves, mostly people like Bertha Roth,
All of us were supposed to be able to be in there all together.
to talk about what's going on with the Affordable Care Act.
I'm going to potentially lose my health insurance. I've had a pre-existing condition. I've had breast cancer. What's going to happen to me? We were under the understanding it was a town hall meeting, and they were only allowing 4 people in at a time.
And while they were all singing and waiting, police were putting up crime scene tape so Kaufman could leave.
Please be sure to hear all your constituents want to speak to you.
6 minutes before the event was supposed to end.
We were told at one point everyone would get their time, and then he sneaks out 6 minutes early. I think he couldn't remember.
Stein's statement reads, quote, "Unfortunately, we only reserve the room at the Aurora Central Library for 90 minutes, which is usually plenty of time to see everyone. For those who were unable to see the congressman today, we apologize." All they wanted was a voice. Instead, they got a closed door and a statement.
And my spouse, who had health insurance, passed away. What do I do? You know, what am I supposed to do?
ABC affiliate in Denver, 9 News. That happened this weekend during a Meet with Congressman Mike Kaufman constituent event in his district.
Now, if you noticed, they put up crime scene tape. Yeah, it was a crime. It was a crime that all of these people, all of these that voted Republican, that voted for Trump, basically ignored what they were told. They were told that the Affordable Care Act was going to be repealed if Trump won. They were told that their own congressman was going to vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act. So instead of believing what they were told, they, for some inexplicable reason, voted against their own self-interest and voted these guys in. So now, as I stated in a previous video, the crying is starting. And honestly, yeah, I don't have any sympathy for these people because they knew what was going to happen and they voted for it to happen anyway. I would submit that if all of the Congress people in the House held town hall meetings regarding their decision to repeal the Affordable Care Act, you would have a lot of people who would change their minds about voting for their own individual representative and also a Mr. Trump. But hey, it's too late now. It's too late, baby. It's too late.
In terms of the remarkable and early protests that we are already seeing against this incoming president, I think there's a couple things going on here. The first is very simple. Donald Trump isn't sworn in yet, but the Congress already is, the Republican Congress, and the Republican Congress already is voting. They're already acting to start to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Whether or not you like the Affordable Care Act, it's inarguably true that tens of millions of Americans have health insurance or otherwise are benefiting personally from that legislation, from what President Obama and the Democrats did when they put that into place. There are tens of millions of Americans who have health insurance who didn't have it before. There are many Americans who know that they only have health insurance because of that legislation. And there are many Americans who will tell you that they are only alive because they have health insurance and because they have the protections afforded by that legislation. It's a life and death thing. And when you take something like that, that is a life and death thing for a lot of people, you take that away, do not be surprised when people are moved to act. So that is one thing that is going on.
Now, I will submit that, yes, it is a life and death thing. But they're just thinking about a life and death thing now? Really? So after you have voted against your own self-interest, now you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I could die if I don't have health insurance. You weren't thinking about that before all along when these guys were telling you they were going to get rid of this? That those thoughts never crossed your mind. And again, 20 million people or more have benefited from the ACA. A bunch of them from Medicare expansion, and a bunch of them from being able to obtain health insurance for the first time. Now, there's a debate about the affordability of it. Some places it's gone up a lot, but that also didn't take into account that the subsidies also went up even more than the increase in the premiums. People don't think. You guys swallowed Donald Trump's bullshit and the bullshit of your own elected representatives, and now you realize that you made a mistake, and yeah, as I said earlier, it's too late.